Hello viewers, today we are going to do the poem Winter by Horace. The objectives of this lesson are to study the poem Winter in detail and summarize it for deeper understanding, to analyze and appreciate the poem from its various aspects, and to study the poem in detail. Winter. See how Soracte stands glistening with snowfall, and the labouring woods bend under the weight. See how the mountain streams are frozen, cased in the ice by the shuddering cold. Drive away bitterness and pile on the logs. Bury the hearthstones, and with generous heart, out of the 4-year-old Sabine jars, O Thaliarchus, bring on the true wine. Leave the rest to the gods. When they have stilled the winds that struggle far away over the raging seas, you will see that neither the cypress trees nor the old ash will be able to stir. Don't ask what tomorrow brings. Call them your gain, whatever days fortune gives. Don't spurn sweet love, my child, and don't you be neglectful of the choir of love or the dancing feet. While life is still green and your white-haired old age is far away with all its moroseness, now find the campus again and the square's soft whispers at night, at the hour agreed, and the pleasing laugh that betrays her, the girl who is hiding away in the darkest corner, and the pledge that's retrieved from her arm or from a lightly resisting finger. Quintus Horatius Flaccus, who is called Horace, the Latin poet and satirist, was born near Venusia in southern Italy on December 8, 65 BC. His father was a manumitted slave who, as a collector of taxes or an auctioneer, had saved enough money to buy a small estate and thus belonged to the same class of small Italian freeholders as the parents of Virgil. Apparently, Horace was the only child and as such received an education almost beyond his father's means, who, instead of sending him to the school at Venusia, took him to Rome, provided him with the dress and attendance customary among boys of the upper classes, and sent him to the best masters. At 17 or 18, he proceeded to Athens, then to the chief school of philosophy and one of the 3 great schools of oratory, to complete his education. And he was still there when the murder of Julius Caesar on March 15, 44 BC rekindled the flames of civil war. Horace's works were often autobiographical and dealt with moral and political issues. In his Epodes, Horace suggests leaving Rome to find a new golden age in the distant lands in the Atlantic. In the secular hymn, Horace expresses his approval of Augustus's reforms, and in the 4th book of the Odes, he reflects on the inevitability of death. Time's winged chariot hurrying near was his recurrent theme, on the other side of the poems praising simple pleasures. In the famous Soracte ode, he advises everyone to defy the chill of winter by drinking good wine and by enjoying life. On November 27 in 8 BC, Horace died in his 57th year. Virgil died 11 years earlier. Ovid, still a young man, was the only considerable poet whom he left behind, and with his death the Augustan age of Latin poetry ends. Horace wrote some of the most touching poetry of the age. His focus on the simple pleasures of life was very appealing to the Roman masses, especially after the chaos of the civil wars. The appeal, however, transcends the period in which they were written. They have meaning and relevance even in our modern world. Horace was, along with Virgil, the leading Roman poet in the time of Emperor Augustus. He is considered by the classicists to be one of the greatest and most original of Latin lyric poets, appreciated for his technical mastery, control and polish, and his mellow, civilized tone. He is also known for his lyric or love poetry and many biting satires and hymns. The Odes, Latin Carmina, are a collection in 4 books of Latin lyric poems by Horace. Books 1 to 3 were published in 23 BC. According to the journal Quadrant, they were unparalleled by any collection of lyric poetry produced before or after in Latin literature. A 4th book consisting of 15 poems was published in 13 BC. The Odes were developed as a conscious imitation of the short lyric poetry of the Greek originals. Pindar, Sappho and Alcais are some of Horace's models. His genius lay in applying these older forms to the social life of Rome in the age of Augustus. The Odes have been considered traditionally by English speaking scholars as pure literary works. The format and style of the Horatian ode have been emulated by other poets. Recent evidence by a Horatian scholar suggests that they were intended as performance art, a Latin reinterpretation of Greek lyric song. Odes have a formal poetic diction and generally deal with a serious subject. The strophe and antistrophe look at the subject from different, often conflicting perspectives, with the epode moving to a higher level to either view or resolve the underlying issues. The poem Winter is a translation of the Soracte ode. The charm of the Soracte ode is derived from Horace's ability to combine the traditional themes of lyric poetry in new ways. See how Soracte stands glistening with snowfall, and the labouring woods bend under the weight. See how the mountain streams are frozen, cased in the ice by the shuddering cold. The subject of the poem is Thaliarchus, addressed in the 8th line. Horace is sharing his thoughts on the proper enjoyment of youth. Soracte is an isolated mountain, 2,267 feet or 691 meters high in Latium, central Italy, north of Rome. It was celebrated in the poetry of Virgil and Horace. In ancient times, it was crowned with a temple of Apollo. There is now a convent near the summit. The poem begins with an image of winter. Mount Soracte covered with snow and the trees laden with ice and frost stands white with deep snow. The labouring woods no longer support the weight, and the rivers stagnate with the sharpness of the frost. The woods let go of their burden, while the rivers stand still with sharp ice. This image then is set in strong contrast with the poet's description of the warmth inside the house of Thaliarchus, Greek master of the festivities, where wine flows abundantly and logs are heaped upon the fire. This contrast reminds Horace rather abruptly of how all things such as the cold winter are determined by the gods and must be entrusted to them. As a result, humankind, the poet says, should enjoy its youth while it can, taking delight in such simple pleasures as the warmth of the fire and the distractions of love. Drive away bitterness and pile on the logs. Bury the hearthstones, and with generous heart, out of the 4-year-old Sabine jars, O Thaliarchus, bring on the true wine. The poet requests everyone to drive away the cold, harsh winter. The bitterness of the season should be changed to a warm, generous place. Get the fire logs and bury the hearthstones near the fireplace. Dispel the cold by liberally piling logs on the fireplace and draw out more generously. He asks the master of ceremonies to take out the 4-year-old unmixed wine from the 2-handled Sabine jar. Sabina is a region in Italy, northeast of Rome, where Horace had a simple estate. Using this symbol for family life, he yearns for pure wine which is not diluted. Leave the rest to the gods when they have stilled the winds that struggle far away over the raging seas. You will see that neither the cypress trees nor the old ash will be able to stir. The third stanza also presents a pair of balanced and complementary scenes with instructions on how we are to welcome the return of spring by our behavior towards one another and towards the immortal gods. First, we are to spruce ourselves up either with evergreen cypress trees, which might reveal a preference either for a long and safe life in a transitory world, not where the old ash will stir. This contrast reminds Horace rather abruptly of how all things such as the winter cold are determined by the gods and must be entrusted to them. As a result, humankind, the poet says, should enjoy its youth while it can, taking delight in such simple pleasures as the warmth of the fire and the distractions of love. Leave the rest to the gods, who will lay the struggle of the winds with the raging ocean, and then neither the cypress trees nor the aged ashes can move or stir. In this way, Horace moves from a description of a natural scene to a commentary on the human condition. This ode may be read on a number of levels. It captures, as does much of Greek lyric poetry, the particular feeling that its author had at a given moment. Yet, it is also a symbolic commentary on the contrast between youth, which is the fire inside, and old age, which is the white snow outside. Don't ask what tomorrow brings, call them your gain, whatever day's fortune gives. Don't spurn sweet love, my child, and don't you be neglectful of the choir of love or the dancing feet. Avoid inquiring what may happen tomorrow, and whatever day's fortune shall bring to you, score them up for gain. Don't neglect being a young fellow. The pleasant loves nor the dances, as long as the ill-natured hoariness keeps itself off from your blooming age. Enjoy in your youth the choir of love and dance with your love. While life is still green and your white-haired old age is far away with all its moroseness, now find the campus again and the square's soft whispers at night, at the hour agreed and the pleasing laugh that betrays her, the girl who is hiding away in the darkest corner, and the pledge that's retrieved from her arm or from a lightly resisting finger. While you are still young and the old age is far away with all its moroseness, enjoy yourself. The harmonious order and balance of the first three stanzas is suddenly disturbed by the sudden and unexpected appearance of death in the fourth. Epicurean commonplaces underlie the speaker's advice and reverse the aged and youth hierarchy. The older speaker has authority, but youth is more desirable. Campus is mentioned as an athletic sports center in different parts of the city, especially around the temples. This is the resort of loungers in the afternoon. The squares are places where the lover goes at the appointed hour to the door, and the girl hides until she betrays herself with her laugh. The lover then rushes in and carries off as a lover and retrieves the pledge, taking her bracelet or ring after a struggle on her part. Now let both the campus marshes and the public walks and soft whispers at the approach of evening be repeated at the appointed hour. The delightful laugh, the betrayer of the lurking damsel from some secret corner, and the token ravished from her arms or fingers. Death is the chief threat and spur to the enjoyment of life. The present dissolves into a simultaneous past and future. The winter yields to spring. The single interior dramatic space of the ode encompasses both a vast uncontainable landscape and a paradoxically interior space within the exterior campus Mauritius. The poem can be read at different levels. The ode is composed of 6 stanzas of 4 lines each. The lines alternate between a longer hexameter line and a shorter line of 11 syllables. Horace's meters are very different. The biggest difference is that they are based on a syllabic length rather than on stress patterns. A syllable in a Latin poem is considered either long or short, and the lines of verse are made up of feet arranged in patterns of long and short syllables. There is little flexibility in substituting one foot for another. Word accents, however, are much more variable in Latin verse and actually provide a counterpoint to the relatively inflexible quantitative meter. There are 2 main sets of images: cold, age, death, and warmth, youth, life. The former is marked with toil and pain, static and barren solitude, and permanent aspect. The latter is full of vitality and joy. Horace supplements this imagery with secondary imagery of colors, white and green, trees, woods, cypresses and mountain ashes, and liquids, rivers, wine and sea. The last 4 stanzas contain images and ideas that belong to both sets of associations. There is a duplicity and profound irony in the ambivalence of images such as the wine and trees, which suggest on one hand joy and vitality and on the other transience and death. Even the fire in the second stanza is such an ambivalent image, being warm on one hand and also fluid and transient on the other. This fire, moreover, as already suggested, is not the true opposite of the winter in the first stanza. The fire in the hearth is an artificial man-made heat, a part of man's attempt to ward off the cold of death, an idea which becomes more explicit in the final stanza. Horace's own feelings are inherent in the poem insofar as he too is human and prone to aging. It seems as if in line 18 he tries to shake off the thoughts of age and death, but ironically they creep in again, now more persistent and explicit. Horace has sublimated and externalized in richly symbolic language his own thoughts and feelings in order to make them valid and representative of the thoughts and feelings of all mankind. The ode opens with the mountain scene, a solid, lonely image that suggests solitude. The physical size, which is imposing, overpowering and strong, is vividly present before our eyes. Then the trees struggling under the weight of snow is suggestive of pain, in other words. The green trees are covered with white snow and the weight forces the trees to collapse and become still with pain. The second stanza is completely on a different scene. Though it is winter, the setting is indoors. There is action unlike the still scene in the first stanza. The action and warmth is that of Thaliarchus, the master of cheer, and suggests the image of festivities celebrated with wine. The whole scene is warm and generous. The indoor scene is friendlier, more intimate and inviting. Sabine wines, the main symbol of the second stanza, is fleeting and momentary. After 2 strikingly contrasting stanzas of highly imaginative and suggestive expression, Horace suddenly changes in the third and fourth stanzas to a more direct statement. We are now presented with the moral and hinted with the meaning of the symbolic language. Horace advises us to enjoy life while we can and leave the rest to destiny, to love and dance while we are young and before troublesome old age overtakes us. This is the well-known carpe diem theme frequent in Horace's poems. It places the poem on a deeper level, giving a moral significance to the natural description in the first and indoor description in the second stanza. The static nature of the first stanza, the warmth and moment of the second stanza, and the struggle and action in each stanza is compared to the defeated and static old age and vital and confident youth. The idea of trees has already been suggested in the general scheme. The poem in lines 11 and 12, with reference to the two types of trees, are introduced for a definite purpose, and they have been placed at the end of their lines to make sure that the reader notices them. The cypresses, of course, introduce the idea of death, and the mountain ashes link up with the only mountain in the poem, Sorakt. Here is the hint to the symbolic meaning of Sorakt and the scene it dominates in the first stanza, of age and death. If the first stanza then represents age and death, the second stanza represents youth and life. Green and white are being set against each other, juxtaposed to symbolize and summarize the eternal conflict of age and youth. Then, as if to shake off the thoughts of age and death, lingering on with the Morosa, Horace suddenly plunges into the present with its joys and pleasures. Horace is thinking in images and terms of cold and warmth, and since he has opened the poem with winter, it is only natural that he should want to close it with spring or summer, and he associates it with the youth, the spring of life, the joy of life, and the present moment. With the sudden transition, Horace turns all his attention to particular moments in young lives, moments which only exist here and now in the present, without regard for the future. Associated with youth are also companionship and friendship, ideas implicit in the convivial atmosphere of the second stanza. Now they become explicit in campus and array, which signify public places where people meet. Horace then narrows this companionship and friendship down to love, a relationship between two people only. The idea that the pleasures of youth and youth itself are fleeting. This image has been anticipated by the vine image in the second stanza. The idea of movement at the first, suggesting the vitality and vigor of youth, has now become a movement towards age and death. We begin now to understand fully the significance of Sorakt and its powerful domination of the scene. Sorakt alone is permanent and eternal. It is almost a threat stunning the scene around it, formerly rich and green into a static and barren cold with whiteness. And it is the cold and pallor of death, for death alone is permanent and eternal. Whatever the gods give you, don't spurn sweet lovers nor dances, while old age stays away from your youth. Now is the time for open spaces and playing fields, and for quiet whispers in the darkness of the night, and for the sweet laugh of a girl from the corner, which gives herself away, and to pull the bracelet from her arm or a finger while she resists. Horace moves from a description of a natural scene to a commentary on human condition. The Sorakt ode may be read on a number of levels. It captures, as does much of Greek lyric poetry, the particular feeling that its author had at a given moment. Yet it is also symbolic commentary on the contrast between youth, the fire inside, and old age, the white snow outside. Hope you enjoyed this session on Horace's Winter. Let's meet in the next session. Thank you.